What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to the Sports Card Report. This is week 3, and if you've been following along, you already know that this is the weekly show where we break down what's actually happening in the sports card hobby. Not just headlines, but what people are buying, what is moving, and what collectors are paying attention to right now. This week, we're switching it up a little bit, though. We're going to cover what's hot in the hobby right now, something I'm seeing personally from the shop side of things, and then we're introducing a new segment called Card of the Week. So let's get into it. First up, what's hot right now in the hobby? One thing that's really been noticeable recently is that collectors are going back to buying raw cards instead of only choosing graded ones. For a while, everything in the hobby felt like it had to be graded, a PSA 10 or it was nothing at all. But now, more collectors are starting to buy raw cards again, especially if they think they can grade them themselves. This is creating a bit of a shift. Instead of paying a premium for a PSA 10, collectors would rather buy a clean raw card for cheaper and then take the chance on grading it themselves. It's a little more risky, but the upside is much higher if it comes back as a perfect 10. So we're starting to see more attention on raw cards that look like they have strong grading potential. And that's definitely something to keep an eye on. Now, let's talk about something I think is actually one of the most interesting parts of the hobby right now. Short-term hype versus long-term value. There are always players who get super hot for a very short period of time. Maybe they have a huge game, go on a hit streak, or just start trending online or everywhere. And when that happens, their card prices spike fast. But a lot of the time, those prices don't hold. So one thing smarter collectors are starting to focus on is separating hype from actual long-term value. Instead of chasing whoever is trending that week, they're looking at players who are consistently performing at a high level over time. Because those players are choosing whose cards to tend to hold value better. It's the difference between reacting to the moment and thinking long-term. Now I want to talk about something I'm seeing from the shop side, because this is something you don't really get unless you're actually around the hobby every single day. One thing I've noticed is that younger collectors are coming into the hobby way more than people think, and they're not always chasing the same things older collectors are. A lot of young collectors are more focused on cards that look really cool, players that they watch, or stuff that they can show off to their friends. And they're not always thinking about grading, population reports, long-term value, short-term value, investing. They just want cards that they like and that they want. And honestly, that's probably how most people got into the hobby in the first place. I mean, that's how I got into it. So it's interesting seeing that the next wave of collectors come in with a completely different mindset. And that's actually really good for the hobby long-term, in my opinion. All right, let's get into a new segment called Card of the Week. Each week I'm going to highlight one card that I think is interesting, underrated, or just worth talking about. So this week's Card of the Week is the 2018 Topps Chrome Shohei Ohtani rookie card. Now, this is a card most collectors already know about, but here's why I'm bringing it up. Ohtani isn't just a good player. He's one of the most unique in the history of baseball. And when you combine that with his global popularity, being on the national stage for Japan, highlight level moments, and the consistent performance, it creates a level of demand that's different from almost any other player in the world. Even when the market fluctuates, cards like this tend to stay relevant because of who the player is. It's a good example of a card that sits somewhere between modern hype and long-term collectability. And those are the types of cards that are always worth paying attention to. Now, one last quick thing before we wrap up. If you're trying to get better at the hobby, one of the best things you can do is just pay attention. Watch what sells, watch what people are talking about, look at what disappears quickly when it hits the market. Because over time you start to notice patterns, and once you understand those patterns, you're way ahead of most collectors. And just to keep everyone posted, I'm going to be releasing a new website/app available on both Mac and on iPhone that is going to show you what is trending, what's not trending, and a way to add cards to your collection, to budget yourself weekly or monthly, to keep yourself in certain parameters so that you know what to collect and you know what patterns to look at for what is buying and what to be buying. And that's going to wrap up week 3 of the Sports Card Report. If you've made it this far, you're already ahead of most people in the hobby just by staying informed. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and like this video so you don't miss next week. And let me know in the comments what you think the most underrated card in the hobby is right now. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.